So what's a super fast, easy, and inexpensive way to improve the look of any portrait? Try improving the light with a photoreflector. Now in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what a reflector is, how it works, and why it might be your next favorite piece of gear. And what's cool is that reflectors solve a lot of problems for outdoor portraits using natural light, for indoor portraits using constant light, and even for flash portraits using different lighting setups. Let's start off by defining exactly what we mean by a reflector, and then I'm going to show you how you can put one to good use. Now, a reflector is anything that bounces light back onto your subject. That's it. I mean, sometimes I might conceptually think of it as a light source in terms of its role in the lighting setup, but it doesn't produce any light on its own. It just redirects light from another source. Now, reflectors come in all shapes and sizes and materials. You've got the traditional circular or collapsible reflectors in silver, gold, white, and even black, which is technically used to subtract light. Some reflectors are flat and some are curved to shape the light in a specific way. These differences have a lot to do with how a photographer just wants to bounce light back onto the subject and, the effect that they want the reflector to have. Like flat reflectors are a great choice for simple fill, and curved reflectors are good for things like clamshell setups. They take the place of an actual fill light when used this way. Now, what's cool is that you can use almost anything as a reflector, like a light-colored wall, a sheet of foam core, or even a piece of fabric. Whatever works to bounce light back onto your subject. I like using foam core boards unless I, have to go out on location. And I use the collapsible type because they're just easier to take with me. So a reflector can be very useful. And just think about it this way. Without a reflector, you might see harsh shadows on one side of the subject's face. And with a reflector, the light's going to appear softer and you get a more balanced look like this. Like I mentioned earlier, reflectors can be really handy for outdoor portraits, especially when working with natural light. Now, a common scenario is where your subject is facing away from the sun, and this is a smart choice if you want to avoid that harsh light and squinting, but it usually means that their face facing the camera is in shadow. Basically, the sun becomes an overpowering backlight. Now, lots of times the ambient light bouncing around the environment is going to help lift those shadows, but even with that, the face might still not be illuminated enough to compete with the brightness of the background. And this is where a reflector comes in really handy, because by bouncing the natural light back onto your subject's face, you can brighten up the shadows and create a more balanced exposure. Now, here's an important tip. Try to avoid reflecting direct sunlight straight into your subject's face, especially with a silver or gold reflector. And I say this because direct sunlight in the face like that can look pretty harsh. And more than likely, you're probably going to make your subject squint, which is going to make for a not too flattering portrait. So instead, try to bounce indirect sunlight. Try different angles and positions until you find that sweet spot where the light kind of softly fills in the shadows. And if you don't have a proper photoreflector handy, you can get creative by using the environment. For example, a light-colored wall can be used as a natural reflector. If you use something like that, you might need to reposition your subject closer to the wall or adjust your shooting angle, but it can work out really well. Now, if you've got some time to experiment, try a few different approaches. Move the reflector closer or farther away, change the angle, or look for, other reflective surfaces in the environment. All right, so now let's talk about reflectors in a studio or controlled lighting environment. And this could be a home studio or a portable portrait lighting setup. If you're using continuous lights or natural light, like coming in through the windows, reflectors are super easy to use because what you see is what you get. You can visually adjust the reflector's position until you're happy with how the shadows and highlights look. Now, if you're relying on natural light at all in this situation, you're going to have to watch for any changes to the light and make adjustments to the angle and the distance of the reflector if lighting isn't consistent as you're shooting. Now, of course, with flash, it's a little trickier because flash fires so quickly, you'll need to take a few test shots to see how the reflector is affecting your light. The good news is that once you dial it in, it's going to be consistent and reliable throughout a set of shots. If you're shooting solo, you'll want to invest in some type of stand that'll hold the reflector for you so you can position it any way you want and it'll just stay in place. When we started the Portrait Club, we wanted something very different from what we were experiencing in so many Facebook photography groups. We were tired of seeing all the fake and anonymous posts, AI images passed off as real photos, a bunch of useless junk cluttering the feed, and a lot of negativity. None of that is going to help you grow as a photographer. But this is different. The Portrait Club is where photographers who actually want to learn and share and improve, this is where we come together, and it's fun. Here you're going to get encouragement and have real conversations with real people. We do weekly photo challenges, share our favorite shots, and talk gear. This is the kind of community where you're going to feel supported and inspired every time you log in. And along with the community, your membership includes all of our practical courses, like our flagship portrait lighting course and even a full boudoir photography class. Everything's right here, ready for you whenever you need it. Now, if you've been looking for a place to learn, improve, and make real connections without all the noise and drama, the Portrait Club is for you. So go ahead and click to join the community, and we'll see you inside. All right, so why use a reflector? Now, generally, the reason that we want to use a reflector is to control contrast. In photography, contrast is the difference between the brightest areas of your image and the darkest. A sharp, quick transition from light to shadow creates high contrast, what we'd like to call a hard light pattern. A smoother transition gives you less contrast and a softer light pattern. Sometimes harsh contrast is exactly what we want. It's great for adding drama or emphasizing texture. A lot of contrast can help create a certain mood and atmosphere in a portrait. But if you want a softer, potentially more flattering look, you're going to aim for less contrast because that softens up the details and texture. Something a lot of people prefer when it comes to how their faces come across in a portrait. Let's break this all down with a classic one light portrait setup. We're going to keep it simple and focus on the basics, all right? So in a traditional portrait lighting scenario, the most important and most defining light is the key light. So in a one light setup, our one light is the key light. So let's say that you position that light at an angle to the subject to create a classic dramatic look. This light is going to create strong shadows on the opposite side of the subject's face. So you light one side and it makes a shadow on the other. I mean, it just makes sense. Now, this might be exactly the look that you're going for, but sometimes you're going to want to reduce the contrast of a setup like that. So you can get softer transitions from light to shadow, which kind of goes along with the softer look of the light overall. Like what we talked about before, this is what a lot of people prefer. So this is where a second light comes in, and it's usually called a fill light because it fills in some of the shadow areas with a little extra light. The fill light is placed on the shadow side of the subject, and it's usually at a lower intensity than the key light. Its job is to brighten the shadows just enough without competing with the key light. And if you have a second light, that's great. You can easily just dial in the amount of fill light that you want. But what if you don't have a second light and you only have that key light to work with? Well, that's where a reflector comes in really handy. To use a reflector in this scenario, just position it on the shadow side of the subject. The reflector is going to bounce light from the key light back onto the subject, filling in the shadows to some degree. Here's a shot without the reflector, and you can see how dramatic the shadows are on this side of the face. Now here's the same shot with a reflector in place, and you can see how it softens the shadows and evens out the lighting. Now you're not always going to want the same look or the same key light to fill ratio. Sometimes you're going to want a little more fill, sometimes just a slight fill. So to control the effect of the fill, you can adjust the distance between the reflector and the subject. You know, the closer the reflector is, the stronger the fill light's going to be, and the further away it is, the more subtle the effect. All right, using a reflector is one of the simplest ways to add a little sophistication to your portraits. I mean, it gives you a lot of control over contrast and light balance without having to use a second light or a complicated setup. And let's say that you do have two lights to work with. You can use one as your key, naturally, and you can use a reflector in place of an actual fill light. Now you've got that second light that you can use for a nice rim light or a hair light, a background light, whatever works, for really enhancing that portrait. Hey, thanks for watching. If this video was helpful, give it a like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more photography tips.